So Steven said 10 seconds, so I don't know if I need to wait or just go ahead. I'm assuming that I could go ahead after 10 seconds.
I think you're good.
Yes. So
7:09.
we're going to call the Law Committee meeting to order at 7:09. I need a roll call.
Garrett Burkhalter,
Present.
Rosemary Brown,
Yes, present.
Robert Lawson.
Did everyone hear Robert? Okay. So we're going to go through. They heard you, Bob. So we're going to go through the reading and disposal of previous minutes. I want everyone to start with January 22nd, 2020. And I need approval for those minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes for, was it January 22nd, 2020?
Yes.
I have a question.
Mr. Lawson has seconded. All ayes. Aye.
Can I ask a question before you do that, please?
Yes. Go ahead, Ms. Traven.
On the back page, it says that I made a motion to adjourn the meeting, but I'm not on the committee. So I can't do that, correct?
Right, I was seeing, yes.
Were you on the committee last year? I don't know that the new committees were in place.
In January.
Yeah, I think it would have
Maybe
been
that's what it is.
it would have been the committee from the year before.
Right.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
So with all ayes and no nays, that'll pass. I need a motion for the 6/24/2020 meeting. Motion to approve the minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes for the June 24th, 2020 meeting.
Mr. Lawson, second. All ayes.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay. I need a motion to approve the minutes for July 22nd, 2020.
Necessary corrections.
With the 6/24.
With July 22nd.
Well, we haven't got to approval. Someone might have a question on that. So I need a motion to approve the July 22nd, 2020 minutes.
Are you saying there were some corrections, Monica?
No, I'm saying if there are any questions or concerns, it needs to be brought up now. If there are no questions or concerns, I need a motion to approve the minutes of July 22nd, 2020.
Make a motion to approve the minutes for July 22nd, 2020.
I second. All ayes, Mr. Lawson? Aye. Any nays? There were no nays. So we'll go with the agenda that we have set before us. So the first thing that I have on my agenda is amending the appropriations. So I'll pass it to Emily. I believe Tim is still on, but I'll pass it to Emily.
Yeah, Tim is in a better position to answer any questions about this, but it's just an ordinance to increase the COVID-19 fund for firefighters.
Do we have any
I assume this is based on additional revenue that we received from the state, Tim, is that right?
It is. The fire department applied for an additional COVID-19 grant and was approved. So the appropriation is to allow us to spend the grant money when it comes in.
Do we have any questions and concerns about this amendment appropriation? Okay. Next item on the agenda is transfer of funds.
And I think this is the same subject.
Okay.
It is. There was a matching amount required for that grant, and that's what the transfer is for.
And what is the matching amount, Tim?
I believe it is $1,900. I don't have it in front of me, unfortunately. Hang on a second, I can grab it.
Okay.
$1,193.05.
Thank you, Kiana.
You're welcome.
And I'm just asking these questions so the public would know. So it's a matching amount. What's the total amount of the grant?
Total amount of the grant would be that appropriation amount, Carrick.
25,000?
$25,054.
That's the amount.
25,54.
Okay. So no questions or concerns about that. So we'll move on to the tax budget.
So this is a standard resolution that you approve every year that approves the tax budget for the next fiscal year. And I believe we're having a public hearing on this prior to the council meeting. And then this will be presented at the council meeting for approval. I don't have a copy of the budget yet, so the attachment is not on here.
Okay.
I think that will be mailed out by the end of the week.
So are there any questions or concerns about the tax budget at this time?
So we'll get that in advance so we can review it?
Yes, I'll have that to you by in your email by Friday.
Okay, thanks.
The master agreement, police vehicles, and public works truck. Next on the agenda.
This is this item was prepared by our bond counsel, Brenda Weimer. It authorizes a lease purchase agreement to enter into to acquire these vehicles, 2 police SUVs and a public works truck.
Okay. I was not able to attend the finance meeting. Are we on schedule with the police vehicles on the, I guess, the rotation schedule that we have previously put in place?
But I'll double check that with but currently the purchasing right now are necessary to the police department.
Tim, you were breaking up, so I didn't really hear what you said.
Oh, I believe we're on track with the rotation schedule, but I'll have to verify that with Lieutenant Forth and Chief Tillman. The police vehicles we're purchasing right now are necessary to the police department.
And how many vehicles are those?
We're financing 2 vehicles. Later, we will purchase a 3rd one after some additional legislation has been put into place.
And again, I wasn't in the finance meeting, and we probably talked about this in the finance meeting. So we're purchasing 2 2020, 2021 vehicles?
They're 2021 SUVs.
Okay, and the newest vehicles we had before then are 2018s?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any questions or concerns about the agreement with the police vehicles or the public works? The public works vehicle is one we've talked about in the past. What are we purchasing with the public works?
Public works vehicle is a 2020 Ford F-250 pickup truck.
Okay. So are there any questions in regards to the agreement for police vehicles or public works truck? Okay, it moves on to full council. Internet auction is the next agenda item.
Yeah, I will send this out this week. Monica just reminded me of it late this afternoon. So, but this is a standard piece of legislation that we do annually or try to do annually. It allows the village to continue to utilize internet auctions to dispose of obsolete or unneeded municipal property. So it's just an annual document, and I will get that out to you tomorrow.
So this isn't anything that we're about to auction off next
No.
month?
It's just, we are required annually by statute to pass legislation that authorizes that process to be utilized.
Okay. Any questions or concerns about the internet auction? Move on to the next item, public records designee.
So my understanding is that the auditors have been asking for direction as to who the designated person is to deal with public records. That's something that the village should designate a point person so that people who are requesting records know who to direct them to. And it's also important for purposes of keeping a record of what public records requests are made and when they are responded to, so that we can keep a record that we've responded to all requests that we receive. My understanding is that the auditor has also been asking for that information in more recent years from a bigger picture kind of standpoint.
Is there any questions or
Doing
concerns?
Is it,
Go ahead, Ms. Brown.
I've been doing the public records requests.
I was just getting ready to say, should we then appoint Monica officially?
I mean, that's a council designation, so that would come before full council. But I think Monica is certainly familiar with the documents that are kept and maintained by the village, and would be an appropriate person to handle those requests.
So is that something that we would, being that we have full council here tonight other than the mayor, is that something that we would designate tonight or?
No, we should do it by motion at the council meeting on Tuesday.
Okay.
So does anyone have any
Got a question.
objections to us designating Monica?
Any questions or
I have a
concerns
question.
of us designating Monica? Go
Yes,
ahead, Pam.
I believe Pam has a question.
Go ahead, Pam.
Does it depend on what they're, some type of financial records? Is that something that Tim should be part of, or does that matter?
So that person is responsible for directing the request to the particular department that the request is aimed at, and making sure that they receive the documents back, that the documents have gone through legal review if necessary, and that they're produced in a timely manner. So the short answer is no, it doesn't need to be someone from a particular department.
Okay.
Any other questions or concerns about the public records designee?
I'd say there is a requirement for public records training for that designee, so we'll need to make sure that Monica goes to that certified training.
Sorry.
I was just saying, Emily, if she's our selected designee.
So there's two things here. And I think we're talking about two, and it can be the same person, but we need to designate someone who is the point person basically for responding to public records requests. But additionally, under Ohio law, every elected official is required to attend public records training and Open Meetings Act training during their term of office. However, they can designate someone to take that training in their absence. So you can also, some or all members of council could additionally designate Monica to attend that training on their behalf. But we need to make sure that is part of the official minutes, because the auditor's office does request copies of those certificates of completion. So if we don't have one, we need to have a motion showing that a particular elected official didn't attend because they had designated somebody else to attend on their behalf.
Okay.
Isn't there one, when is the next one coming up? Is it in October or something, Tim? I think you looked at those dates.
I looked at them, but they've all been canceled because of COVID. They haven't done a webinar one yet.
See you,
We
Mark.
haven't rescheduled them. I thought I saw something for later in the year.
I did too.
Mhm.
I think
I thought they've been doing the webinars, Tim.
I hadn't seen that, but that doesn't mean that. I'll check it when I get back to the office and see if there's a webinar one. Everything that I had seen on the website had been canceled. And I think there is one scheduled. There may still be one scheduled late in the year, maybe in September, but I don't know that it doesn't say webinar next to it, as I recall.
Okay.
Monica had a question.
Well, I was just gonna make a statement that I did attend last year. I don't know if you have, I don't think I have to take it every year. I went to the clerks training and they did a public records training for us. But I was trying to get with the guy at Kent State to get my training certificate because they just gave us one big one with all that 23 something hours that I did. So it wasn't specific, but a lawyer did it from the state of Ohio.
The training the auditor wants to see is the one from the state's website. I can tell you that. They want to see that certificate every time.
And it's like a 2-hour, I think.
Okay. Kiana has.
And I think it can be done online.
Okay. Ms. Trayview has a question.
No, I was just gonna say, I looked at the Auditor of State website, and there were 3 that were scheduled for August, 1 in August and 2 in September. And they have been canceled.
I think the AG's office does them as well.
Okay.
And that was what I was looking at.
Okay. Are there any other
Attorney General.
questions?
Attorney General's office, is that what you're speaking of?
Mhm.
And possibly done online?
Yeah, I can
Hmm.
help Monica
Mhm.
identify.
And that
make
information
sure.
will be sent out to all council members.
Sure.
Okay.
I just
Any
want
other-
to say, I think sometimes it's, well, personally, I usually go for each of my terms. And I just think it's something good that each council member hears, especially for the newer ones, for themselves.
I think we all went together, Ms. Brown, and it was
Mhm.
information.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would recommend it. Unless there's a reason you can't attend, I would strongly recommend, since council members also have public records in their possession and control from time to time. So,
And I do get quite a few public record requests. And I do have a form from my fellow clerks that I utilize and keep track of, just in case you all want to ever pull them. I have them.
Since I'm the chair of this meeting, I can make light of things. Ms. Trayview, let your kids know there are no cameos during this law meeting. Yeah, so, but if are there any other questions or concerns about a public records designee? Or go ahead, Ms. Boyd. You got to unmute yourself.
I wanted to see the kids. You know how I am about kids.
I know you love the kids. I know you love the kids.
He's trying to come back over here too.
Right. Is there new business? I know I have something to ask.
I have 2 additional pieces of legislation
Okay, go ahead, Emily.
that I emailed out this afternoon. The one is going to authorize the manager to enter into a contract with Hamilton County to perform hydrant repairs and replacements in the village. So that one's fairly straightforward. I included with the documents the contract and the fee schedule that's going to be attached to that contract. So that item doesn't have a specific cap on it. It's based on an hourly rate.
So we need approval on that, or?
So yes, so that will come before council, and you should already have a
Unless
copy
there's-
of that document.
Unless there's something that we keep it in the law committee here, correct?
Right, that's correct.
Are you there, Mr. Lawson, still?
Yes.
So, I see you, Mr. Traver. Go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. I had asked the question before, and I'll check my email to see the fee schedule, but I had asked Jerry before about that particular contract.
Mhm.
Were there any recurring fees associated with that?
So the fees that were in the proposal, the rate for a 3-man crew and a service truck is $130.96 an hour. And this rate will cover repairs and hand digs. And then the rate for a 3-man crew, service truck, dump truck, drag, and backhoe is $188.59 an hour. This rate covers backhoe digs. And they're adjusted annually on January 1st of every year. And there's a 5% technology fee added to every invoice. So that's
Thank you.
the fee schedule.
So are there any other questions or concerns about what we just discussed with Emily? Okay, Emily. You had something else?
Yeah,
for us?
I have one other item, which is, was also emailed out this afternoon, which is an ordinance that's going to provide for salary adjustments for police department, police officers and fire folks in our fire department. I believe this was discussed at Finance Committee on Monday. It's a 5% increase for our firefighters, captains, assistant chief and chief, and our police officers, sergeants, assistant chief and chief in the police department.
So I have a question in regards to that. So with the police department, that is all of these increases, are all of these increases coming from the general budget?
They should be. We don't have a police levy.
But we have a fire levy. So the fire increases, are they coming from the fire levy, from the general budget?
They can come, the way I have them scheduled right now, they're coming from the general budget. They can also come from the fire levy if we need it.
Well, I mean, you're saying they can come from. It needs to be specific where they're coming from. The police doesn't have a levy. The fire department has a levy. I believe that the police is fine coming from the general budget. The fire department has a levy. Their increases need to come from their levy. I know you're saying it can come from that levy, Tim, but it needs to be designated where these increases are coming from.
I can designate that for you if you'd like. The current salary budget for fire in the general fund, even with the 5% increase, is still under budget for the fire department's salaries. But I can absolutely make sure that any increases to fire come from the fire levy.
And again, I apologize that I wasn't at the finance meeting. I'm quite sure you talked about this extensively, but we have a fire levy. We have a fire levy that takes care of the fire department. I don't see a reason to take from the general budget when we have a fire levy that takes care of the fire department. We don't have a police levy that takes care of the police department. So if we have fire levy money, I believe the increases for anybody in the fire department should come from the levy money. That's just my opinion.
And we haven't been taking the salary from, you're just saying the increase. It's not their regular salary, just the increase.
What we did previously is we bought a lot of things with the fire levy budget, and I'm not going to go into that. When we should have been more strategically using that budget to utilize it to do increases to keep our fire department personnel and different things. What I'm saying is right now, a lot of things that we purchased with the fire levy budget have come to pass or at the expiration of what we bought them. We have more money in the fire levy budget to increase salaries outside of going into the general funds than we do police budget. I can see the police budget going into the general funds to increase salaries. I don't see the fire increases coming out of the general funds. I'm just saying this, and I'm putting it out there because when it comes to vote, that's one of the concerns, or that's how I'm going to vote.
But you do understand, you did hear him say that the salary for the fire department, which is presently coming out of the general fund, with these increases, it's still below what was budgeted.
I totally understand whether it's below or whether it's on market. We went to the people and asked for a fire levy to take care of our fire department. And we're not utilizing that money appropriately. That's just my opinion.
I guess my question would be, what's the budget for the fire department? Does the levy cover all of the fire department's expenses?
No, and that's one of the points I wanted to get to. The fire levy is roughly $500,000. The fire department's budget from the general fund is well over $1 million. The fire levy currently, we've utilized that to make payments on the fire truck this year, as well as the ambulances. Currently, because of various fund balance adjustments from LGS, the fire levy has a deficit. Now, the Hamilton County Auditor's Office will send us the second half of our property taxes that funds that fire levy, and that deficit will go away. But it's going to leave us with probably about $200,000 in that levy fund. So one of the things we want to make sure, one of the things we don't want to do is overspend that fund, which is why when we did the salary increases, I wanted to make sure that, again, we had the money to do it. I can make sure that salary increases are charged, that any salary increases to the fire department do come from that levy. It's not a difficult math equation, but the levy itself does not support the fire department completely.
So what I'm saying, Tim, what I'm hearing you say is that the fire levy is $500,000. The total budget for the fire department is $1 million. We're only talking about certain salaries increasing in the fire department, a small percentage of that $500,000. So what you're telling me is that we cannot take that small percentage of the chief, the captain, or whoever we're talking about increasing their salaries and take it from that $500,000 tax levy that we already have in place.
If the question is, can we? Yes, I can make sure that that happens.
Okay. Okay. So I'm asking, when it's brought to full council, I want that on the table. If that's not on the table, I know how I'm going to vote on that. If it's not coming from the tax levy that we can afford to take the 3 or 4 salaries that we're talking about, not the whole tax, not the whole fire department. It's only 3 or 4 salaries we're talking about, an increase. If we're not taking that from the fire levy, I know how I'm going to vote on that. So I'm just making that clear. Go ahead, Pam.
Okay, so Tim, don't we need to understand where that where the levy stood as of 2019?
I'm sorry, what?
The budget,
I don't know.
the budget for 2019, how that has flown over the last year or so, because there was issues with that, the dollar amounts in there, right, at one time.
There were. And
so it's more
again,
to the story than what Mr. Burkholder is kind of understanding.
Well, and I guess, again, when we look at it in finance, that levy fund is currently in deficit.
Right, but it's a history, right? It's not just a overnight type of thing.
Right. Like I said, now that fund comes out of deficit, should come out of deficit this month when Hamilton County makes that second property tax payment. I can go ahead and look at the total increase to the fire department and see that that gets charged to the line item for the fire levy. That, like I said, that's not a big deal to do. But if the question is, part of the question is that levy always going to be there? I don't know if it is or not. Obviously, it has to be voted on every time it expires. Currently, the budget that we have for the general fund would allow for those raises with or without the levy. And I understand Mr. Burkholder's point that if we're going to increase fire salaries, come from the levy because the voters voted for the levy to take care of the fire department. Like I said, it's not a problem for me to make sure that those increases come from the levy. And I can go ahead and see that there's an appropriations adjustment to make sure that can be seen as part of the finances. I'd have to defer to Emily. I don't know that it's appropriate to write it into the legislation, but that's an Emily question. I don't know that I've seen it done that way.
Yeah, we would not do it that way, Tim. You're right. It would be we would have to do a separate amendment to the appropriation ordinance to allocate those expenses to the fire levy fund.
So you're saying that we could take those salaries out of the fire levy?
We can, yes.
Okay.
And what I'll do, I'll go ahead and get the actual, what my estimate for what the actual increase is outside of the general fund. And I'll just make sure that amount is charged to the fire levy. That way, it's coming out of that fire levy fund.
So transparent, like we always say, we want to be transparent. If there's anybody from the community that's looking at this meeting, we asked them to approve a fire levy. They give us more money to operate our fire department. Well, we're still going from the general fund to increase their salaries like we did to get a fire levy. That doesn't make any sense to me. So that's just my opinion.
No, and I understand. The fire levy itself wouldn't pay all of their salaries altogether anyway.
Totally understand. It supplements it.
It does, yes, sir. It can.
Right.
I don't want to say that. So, like you said, you can strategically spend your money, right? So, in the past, I know sometimes it's been used for salaries. Sometimes it's been used to purchase equipment. Sometimes it's been used to make debt payments. It's just a question of how council wishes to use that money to support the fire department.
Okay. So are there any other questions? Ms. Boyd, go ahead.
I understand what you're saying, Mr. Burkhart, because sometimes I think we forget that Woodlawn runs Woodlawn, not any one of us, and we're representing Woodlawn. But I think we need to understand that, and we need to try to give the people what they've asked for, making as much sense as it can. But I agree with you. If that's what the people wanted, that's what the people should get. I think that sometimes we get to the point where we think we know best. We don't know. It's the people who know and the people who tell us what to do. So if that's what they said they wanted, I wasn't here when the fire levy went through, but if that's what they say they wanted, I know they're very passionate about their safety department, their fire and police here in Woodlawn. And so I had asked that we look at even a higher rate of raise if it was possible. But I don't think that Mr. Thaman agreed with that. But I just said, let's look at it if it's possible, so that I can explain to them when their fire and their police make so much less than a median income in the state of Ohio. And that can't be done or wasn't done. And I'm not really happy about that. Before I would just approve something else. It may be that we couldn't do any more than what we're already doing, but at least I owe it to the people to be able to say that and say that we looked at it in several different ways before we came up with offering them an amount that is so much lower than the median income in Woodlawn. So we pay good salaries in Woodlawn to people. We can pay those salaries to the police and fire as well.
Is there anything else from anybody else in regards to this topic?
Yeah, the only other comment I would like to make is that I do need to go over these rates with the chief, with the fire chief. The police, I think, is fine. There are some folks who might actually come off of the list because I think there's a number of part-time people on this list. So I need to go through and identify those with the chief. So if it's revised, you'll get a revised version before the end of the week. But the only changes would be taking off part-time people.
Okay.
They still get the increase, but we don't necessarily identify them all the way we do with our full-time employees.
Okay. Are there any other discussions or questions on this? Go ahead, Ms. Brown.
Yeah, I had some technical difficulties, so can you just summarize what happened in the last 2 or 3 minutes?
In essence, we talked about giving the police and fire an increase. And my question was, the fire department has a tax levy, the police department does not. So why are we pulling from the same pool for the increases when the fire department has a tax levy? Tim has stated that he's going to look into it. He believes we can pull from the tax levy to give the increases. And we pull from the general budget to give the increases for the police department. So that's the gist of the conversation.
I believe the question was asked as to whether or not all of the things that were budgeted for the fire department, if they were coming out of that levy, are they able to come out of that levy? Is that going to take that levy down if we take the increases out of that?
The levy receives about $500,000 a year. So obviously, if you spend money out of the levy, the fund balance decreases, but you get about $500,000 a year into that fire levy. We can spend that for any fire-related items. So whether it's salaries, equipment, things like whatever. But that's a strategic plan from council more than anything else. So it's however you wish to budget it, we can budget it. The fire levy does not support the entire fire department. There's not enough money in it to do that.
Correct. But we're only talking about, I believe you said maybe 4 salaries in the fire department we're talking about increasing.
Well, no,
I don't know how many you said. How many we're talking about increasing in the fire department?
It's everybody.
Yeah, that's roughly 40 people.
Oh, we're talking about 40. Okay.
Yeah.
But it could supplement the increase. I'm not saying it's going to totally take care of the increase. It might be 50% from the fire levy and 50% from the general fund.
Right.
Instead of taking 100% from the general fund when the fire department has a tax levy.
Sure. Yeah, and that's something that we can do in the future. We can budget to essentially spend that entire levy every year, so that general fund doesn't get hit. We don't have to maintain a fund balance in it, and that does make sense because that way it frees up general fund money to do other projects.
Correct. So do we have any other questions in regards to this discussion? Right now, we're in new business. I know Emily stated what she had. Anyone else has new business? I had a question from someone. I was not at the finance meeting, and it was a question of our contract with our law director. What is the contract currently with the law director, and where are we at? I believe that was talked about in the finance meeting. And the question was that the person that brought it to me said, I heard what they heard, and I said, it may not be right. I said, because since I've been on council, I believe our law budget has been more than that. They said they heard that the council budget or the law director budget was $60,000 to $70,000. And we're currently almost at $100,000 right now and have months left. And what I stated is, since I've been on council, I thought that our law director budget was around $88,000 or $80-something thousand. So I wasn't at finance. So can you give me some clarity on the contract with our law director and where we're at currently? I see you paying, but I want Tim to answer that if he can.
So I think the question that I was asked was how much have we spent on legal services?
Correct.
Looking back into 2019 and 2018, legal services were generally costing us between $60,000 and $70,000 a year. Those are round numbers. We currently are at a little over $80,000. Again, I don't have them in front of me. But the issue with the increase for legal services is due to the litigation the village is currently involved with that fire engine.
With the fire trucks and different things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
In addition to that, Doobie, we also had the liquor hearing at the beginning of the year, and my firm has advanced the costs for experts in both the liquor license issue and in the fire truck litigation, and those expenses from those experts get carried on through the bill to the village. I'm not sure if those have been separated out for purposes of those totals, but those are basically costs that aren't being paid to me and my firm. Those are costs that are being paid to experts to support the litigation.
So Tim said the average has been 60 to 70. I know, Emily, you spoke to counsel about your firm requesting an increase, and I believe we agreed to that. Mm-hmm. With that increase, where did it take the average to, Tim, yearly? Do you know?
Well, with the increase, I believe the total estimate for the litigation was 125, and then it was up to about 130. So if you add the numbers together, you're probably going to be at about $200,000 a year, or $200,000 for the litigation plus the regular service.
I think you didn't, because let me go back.
Maybe
go ahead, Emily. Go ahead.
So our estimate to do the fire truck litigation, and I don't want to get into too much detail because some of this was discussed in executive session.
Okay.
But I think the ballpark was about $150,000 was a rough estimate for the entire litigation. That litigation's been going on for a year and a half now. So that carries over 2 years. I think the estimate to do the liquor hearing was about $8,000. And I think that included the expert that we had to hire for that matter. I would agree that generally the average is between 60 and 70,000. You have had a couple of years where we have done work that is kind of outside the norm. For example, the Woodlawn Meadows project, that was about $25,000 to $30,000 worth of additional legal fees. But as you recall, those legal fees were assessed to the project, and the village was paid that money back through the project. So I think generally, yeah, I will definitely say that 2019, 2020 are going to be high legal expense years for you based on what you have going on. But the average should be between 60, I would say actually 60 and 80 based on
the increase that we talked about.
No, I'm just saying generally, if you looked back over the past 5 or 10 years, I would say you probably had low years around 60, high years around 80 with no abnormal projects going on, just based on day-to-day business type things.
Okay. So the actual expenses can be justified if anybody from the village wants to come and see why we're paying extra, whatever they can request.
So if they asked for a copy of my bill, the village gets a bill and it's got all the work that I do detailed on it. Now that narrative of the work that I do is all privileged information. That is attorney-client communication, the work that I'm doing on behalf of the village. And it's important that that be maintained as privileged. However, I do divide up my bill into general litigation or general municipal work and litigation and real estate are probably the 3 biggest areas where we have separate line items. And you can see what the totals are for each of those matters at any time.
So I have last two questions from you, Emily. So the people will understand. You've been with us how long?
I've been with the village since 2010 as the law director, and I've been doing legal work for the village since about 2002.
But would you say this year, pandemic and different things, is probably your highest billing year?
It is probably up there. I do not recall. The year we did Woodlawn Meadows was fairly high, but again, the village didn't bear those costs. And I believe maybe the year I took over was an expensive year, and I'm not sure exactly because that was some of my predecessor. But since I have been the law director, yes, I would say this year is probably one of the highest years.
Okay.
I'd like to ask a question. I thought we never see your itemized bill, but what I wanted to ask about is when the village manager says that he has to ask you questions, does he get charged for that, or do we get charged for that rather?
Yes, you get charged every time I'm asked to do something or have a discussion with the village about village business.
Okay.
So that was kind of the question that came up is who approves the bills? That's kind of what we talked about at the finance meeting. We talked about the total expenses year over year. And also we were trying to understand the approval process of the bill. Should the bill really go to the village manager, or should the bill go to the finance director as a complete approval? And what things are the village being charged for is what we were trying to understand during the meeting.
Right.
That's we really got the 60 to 70,000 that that Mr. Balcarter mentioned, but that's kind of the road that we were trying to discuss.
Yeah. So council approves my rates and my work usually once every 3 years. And they approved by resolution the retention of me and Strauss Troy to serve as law director, and the hourly rates. I believe the last time was 2019, probably around March. So that legislation is on file with the clerk of council. So council approves that, and then council approves the appropriated amount for legal services. And as long as the bills fall within the appropriated amounts, it's okay for the manager to approve and pay those bills. I am hesitant to have bills distributed more widely within the village because I do put a lot of detail into the narrative of the work I do. And it would be detrimental, I believe, for that to be too widespread. I think if any council member ever wants to see a bill, they can certainly go meet with the manager and review all of them. But it wouldn't be a good practice to have them distributed on a larger basis. I have no problem with the finance director seeing it either.
I just think he could get his arms around just the total cost when they come through. If the finance director more in on some of that, I'm not sure of all the detail that they need, but I do think that they need some type of general understanding of what that number looks like.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. I was just following the direction I had previously been given by council, which was to submit the itemized bill to the manager and the invoice to the finance director.
Okay. I mean, we probably have to talk offline for some of that, but that's kind of where the discussion.
We can talk more in the next finance meeting, Pam. Pam, in your finance meeting, we can address this more.
Yeah, that's what we were trying to address Monday.
Okay.
Yeah, and
But it was with the understanding that if council wanted to see the bills, council would be privy to those bills, to the narrative also.
Okay.
But as she was saying, not widely spread. The issue, what happened was someone inadvertently brought her narrative attached to her bill to one of our meetings, and there were outside people in the meetings, and that should not have happened.
Okay.
But certainly council has the ability to see the narratives.
Okay. Go ahead, Tim.
sorry. I was going to say, I know Jerry has shared those itemized bills with me as well. So it's stuff that I've seen as well. But yeah, it's not a problem for me to review them in more detail if that's what council wishes me to do.
so we can come into you and see the itemized bill? I don't mind that I can't have that it can't go into, I can't take it away, but I would like to see it.
I believe Jerry probably has access to all of them. I don't know that I have all of them just on my hard drive or in my office. We have, on my side, we keep the more generalized invoices attached to the payments. We don't attach payments to like the bill along with the narrative. That way, if somebody requests it, they don't get the narrative with the bill.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Emily has done a great job of explaining to us, some of the reasons why the bill has been a little bit higher than normal, just all the litigation and things, just a general understanding of what it is. But I think it's just important when the numbers get kind of outside the budget, that things that the way we think it should go, we should definitely understand, what that is. So I didn't know that we got charged every time someone spoke with Emily about issues. I didn't know that. I thought it was some type of retainer or some type of, general fee of whatever that is for so many calls. So that can be kind of pricey if we're, calling just to discuss basic things. So.
And Pam, just for history, and we're not going to harp on this long because we close this meeting down in a minute. But previous times we had several council members calling Emily, and that took the charge up for the same questions that all council members had. So we streamlined that. We streamlined that and had only certain people calling Emily. So yes, every time someone talks to Emily, there's a charge to the village. And I agree. I think Emily is doing a great job. And one of the questions that I asked, because the numbers didn't set well with me, and I understand we have a lot of litigation with the fire trucks and different things that have gone on in the village. And I just wanted it to be in the Zoom meeting that we made clarity of that. Go ahead, Ms. Boyd.
Well, that was the same thing when I understand we can't give a detailed breakdown or talk like you told us. I understand what you were saying, but when we are totally blind to what's going on, or none of us are seeing any of the itemizations that you have, then people feel that we're not doing our job. Now, I realize I can't tell them, well, this was for that or this was for that, but I can explain to them that every time somebody asks you a question, I know that's why I don't ask you. That's why I go to state of Ohio. But I don't ask you because I know you do charge. But I hear Mr. Thaman, I haven't had a meeting with him where he doesn't talk about he has to call you, he has to call you. And that was kind of frightening. You were getting charged. That's not on you. I understand that. That's what you do as a law firm. I have no problem with that. But some of the questions might be able to ask, like my little general questions can be able to ask state of Ohio or Hamilton County rather than to ask you and get a charge.
Well, I'll just make this one comment. This issue comes up. We've discussed this many times over the past years, issues with, we get charged when we call you and those types of issues. And the answer is yes. I mean, that's the only way for lawyers to earn an income is to charge for their time. It's the only thing that we have to sell. But that being said, the village budgets so much money a year for their legal counsel and for their law director. And I think it's important that they use that money they've appropriated for that purpose. I am happy to answer questions. I'm happy to answer questions about any bill item that ever appears on the bill. And, if there's an issue with it, I'm happy to discuss it. Just for transparency's purposes, I do work for the village at a rate that is probably only about 60% of my normal hourly rate. So I do work at a reduced fee for the village. And I'm happy to do that. I've been here for a long time and I really appreciate working with the village. But I want to be as transparent as possible. And there was, one time when we had this issue come up in council before, I said, there's two elements to my bill. The one is the hours and the second is the hourly rate. And that's how you get the bill. And, the hourly rate is low. It's comparable for municipal type work. But it's industry standard, I believe. And the hours are just based on what the village needs and what your legal needs are. And I would not recommend that you cut corners in that respect, because it always ends up costing more in the end, to not start off on the right foot with any of those issues. So like I said, I'm always happy to have a discussion with anyone about it. If there are questions, I'd rather resolve any issues or any misconceptions about what it is that we're doing for the village. So just feel free to let me, call me or let me know.
Are there any other questions or concerns on this issue? So if there are no other questions or concerns, there's no new business, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion.
Lawson?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
I second.
All ayes? Aye.
Okay.
Any nays? All right, guys. Good meeting.